Power.
Lembit, Opik.
This is the Lembit Opik Show on today's News Talk, TNT Radio.
Welcome back. Good morning if you're in the UK. Good afternoon or evening if you're in Australia. Wherever you are, thank you for joining me. Lembit Opik here at today's News Talk, the home of free speech. Lots coming up in this hour. Our very own TNT's Roger Gawalt will be here to tell us what rock bottom business investment in the UK really means for us. Why is it going so badly? Can Labour do any better? Well, we'll find out what Roger thinks. TNT's Kate Sheramani joins us to discuss cancer care in the UK and how it's decades behind our European partners. We're meant to have left the European Union. Why can't we do better? And Lord Christopher Monckton is back by popular demand. You love him, folks, so we're going to have him on as well. And that is definitely responding to consumer demand. You're very, very pleased every time. Let me read some of your messages before we go to our very own UK news correspondent. That is Gemma Cooper. I can't keep up with your pictures, Lisa, says Mogden. I wonder what's going on there. I'd love to see Count Binface sitting in Parliament. That would be hilarious, says Grumpy Old Woman. Count Binface is a great character. I think he's standing against Rishi Sunak. The way things are going, he's probably got a chance of winning. Lord Melby says, my message to the British people, WEF puppet and traitor Starmageddon will run the country into the ground if selected as Prime Minister. Don't be fooled. Think for yourself for a change. This is me just doing my bit to nudge the Overton window because we all know who's watching these chat rooms. Conspiracy theory. Maybe you're right. Mogden says, what are Biden's policies? All I can see is the destruction of the United States. Red got so angry. Red wrote something and then deleted it. Lisa says, I wonder if I can vote now living in Australia. Every vote counts. Well, you can do, but you've missed the postal ballot if you haven't asked for it already. Just a bloke thinks Biden's not losing his marbles and the videos of fate. And Christopher Monckton next. Yay, says Lord Melbury. You'll have to wait about half an hour, but he'll be here. I promise you, he's going to be here. Oh, dear, another lockdown, says Lisa. Saltenberg, you can hardly see the strings, says Lord Melbury. I'm very doubtful about Saltenberg myself, actually. I tend to agree. Don't like the line. Don't like the mood music there. Wouldn't that be for an interview with Stinky Joe, says Mogden, about another comment about from Lord Melby. Maybe the interview could be sponsored by Huggies. Yeah, there's a certain amount of cynicism I detect in your lines. Before we go to Gemma Cooper, let me just make a couple of comments about the UK situation. It seems to me that Reform UK, we feature quite a lot here on today's News Talk, not because we're formally aligned with them, but because they actually seem to be speaking quite a lot of sense and say a lot of the things I believe in. They don't believe there's a climate emergency. They're not keen on the World Economic Forum, that sort of thing. They seem to be doing well. I think there's a lag in the system. Interestingly, when normally you get poll after poll after poll, it's gone a bit quiet on that front. I'd be willing to bet, though, that in the real world, the Reform UK party is pretty much level pegging in terms of the popular vote with the Conservatives. They won't get many seats just because the system is stacked in favour of the Uni party and against new aspirants. But as I've said before, my prediction is Labour will get a huge majority, and then it'll be a toss-up between the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats for second place in seat numbers. But I think that Reform will come second or third in the popular vote. And that's really an indication of what we've said many times here, that there's a huge disillusionment with the old parties, that Keir Starmer doesn't really look like he's offering something substantially different to what we've got now. I was watching Rachel Reeves as one of the fairly senior politicians in the Labour Party this morning, and it's just dull. It was inconsequential, contentless blabber, as far as I could see. And my suspicion, therefore, is what you're seeing with Nigel Farage and Richard Tice with Reform UK, and similarly with George Galloway on the left, with Workers' Party is an opportunity to redraw the boundaries. This happened in Northern Ireland politics. There was a big churn there. And it's just possible now that with the popular vote going so strongly in favour of Reform UK, that we will see a pretty seismic shift. But here's the big point. I don't think that we're really going to be debating the outcome of this election. That's a foregone conclusion. I think we've seen the beginning of the 2029 general election. It might be even sooner than that. And in that situation, it's just possible that we will see seismic changes in who runs the country. For now, I don't see any real improvement. I think that Keir Starmer as Prime Minister will disappoint a lot of people and will fracture the vote on the left in the same way that the Conservatives have fractured the vote on the right. These are specific predictions, so we can look in a year or two to establish whether I'm right or wrong. But the import is that you as a voter, if you do have a vote in the UK, need to think carefully who you support here. I'm not telling you how to vote, but I do think that the party system is broken, and I say that as a former party politician myself. The best thing that could happen is that we get free thinkers, people like maybe non-establishment characters, and those people might be more independent-minded and less likely to follow the king shilling of the World Economic Forum. I'm an idealist here. I always have been. And my naivety in that sense probably cost me votes, maybe even cost me my seat. But on the upside, I think across the next 5 years, there's a chance to get good people back into Parliament. And that, let's be honest, it desperately needs them. Maybe you should consider voting and then actually standing yourself. Think of 2029 as a breakthrough year, not 2024. Coming up next, we're going to be speaking with Gemma Cooper, our UK news correspondent, to see what she's found in the press. All of that with me, Lembit, Opik, right here on TNT.
There's a lot going on, so it's important to stay informed and up to date.
Get ready, cuz here we go.
At the top, 30 minutes past and when it breaks. Today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Gemma Cooper, welcome back. It does feel to me that this election's over now. And what we're really seeing is the beginning of the 2029 election. That's something Reform UK, and I'd say the Workers' Party, that's Galloway's outfit, realise already.
Yeah, I think so. And then Nigel Farage, now leader of Reform UK, has said that, hasn't he? So I've got my eyes on 2029. This is just the beginning. I fully intend to stand for PM. So he set that tone, absolutely. And I do tend to agree. I think we are going to see a change in politics, change in everything. We're seeing a change in everything as old structures begin to crumble. But I absolutely agree with you on the way the main uniparty is campaigning. It is dull as ditch water, and Labour actually have suspended one of their candidates from the party this morning. He's lost the whip, in the last few hours at least, for not, keeping to the narrative, the dull as ditch water narrative. And they've suspended him for something he posted on social media in 2018. And Rachel Reeves this morning has said it's absolutely right. He's gone, this person. I mean, you can't do anything ever in your life, ever. The offending material that Andy Brown, was standing for Labour in Scotland, in a Scottish constituency, he posted something in 2018 claiming that Novichok, the nerve agent that was used in the Salisbury poisonings all those years ago, he posted something from RT, remember Russia Today, which was a broadcast channel until Ofcom took its license away for, again, not adhering to the Western globalist narrative. But he posted something from Russia Today claiming that the poison was never produced in Russia, but was used in the US, UK, and other NATO states. So it's something that a television station broadcast. He also posted something around the same time saying that the problem with the Labour Party, which was then headed by Corbyn, he said that he posted a quote about right-wing Jews in the Labour Party disagreeing with Corbyn's very public support for Palestine, which he has held for decades. So they've taken him off the ballot for stuff he produced, that he just shared. He didn't say it himself. He shared other people's opinions. And as I say, Rachel Reeves this morning, the Shadow Chancellor, soon to be our Chancellor, proper, in charge of the finances, tax raids on us, basically. She's saying, yeah, it's right that he's gone. So you can never, ever really express yourself in the Uni Party. You just toe the line. And that is it. So, yeah, it's all bland and blather. You're quite right. Just
to tell you, I was thrown out of the Liberal Democrats for a while because I did a talk during lockdown. I was a bit bored. I did a talk during lockdown called "Is There a Cure for the Liberal Democrats?" and they took offence about it. They said I was bringing the party into disrepute. When I pointed out that I never voted to break the pledge on tuition fees, and if they throw me out, they have to throw Ed Davey out, they reinstated me. It's ridiculous. The idea that they went to all that trouble, and it was rather dark. My mother was dying at the time, so I wasn't really very attentive to the whole process. The idea that the Liberal Democrats, clear in the name there, would throw me out for poking fun at the party rather proved my point. It's amazing. The Uni Party is just dead on its feet as far as I'm concerned now. And I don't miss this horrendous conformism that you now see between those three parties. No wonder that Reform on the right and Workers' Party on the left are doing well. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I think it's a very good point to make. And bringing the party, whichever element of the Uni Party, into disrepute is basically anything, isn't it? It's anything now that doesn't fit what the leader is saying of that particular part of the Uni Party. There's no room for character. There's no room for flair, which is why you're exactly right. When you do get these big figures like Galloway and Farage, who clearly very engaged with their egos, but it's makes them more human. And it's interesting, earlier in the week, we talked about that question that Keir Starmer was asked, are you a robot? On our phone in, and yeah, or a question time, wasn't it? Or the PM, the PM debate he had with Sunak, and someone said, "Oh, and he looked like a robot when he was answering the question," and that's what the Uni Party wants: good little robots that have absolutely no intention of letting their true personalities come through.
You can imagine that. You can imagine whenever you do that thing on the internet, am I a robot? He has to hesitate before he ticks the box. I am not a robot. Anyway, sorry. I'm being a bit mean. Sorry, Keir, but I do mean it. Carry on.
Just a couple of other headlines. Inflation has fallen to a lowest level in 3 years, but no hopes of no hopes of interest rates being cut before the general election. So still quite high interest rates for people with mortgages. Sunak's been facing a grilling on one of the main radio stations in the UK. He's been asked about Farage. Would he welcome Farage into the Conservative Party? He's been asked, would he go to being a backbencher when he loses the election? His answer to all the questions that he's asked this morning is, I'm focused on winning the election. I'm focused on winning the election. He's not answering a single question. He's just saying, I'm focused on winning the election. I'll get back to that. I'm focused on winning the election. He sounded like a good little robot, and also, just staying with Farage for a minute, the BBC, once again, talking about BBC, they've bowed to public pressure. They're putting on a special edition of the programme Question Time on June the 28th, and they left out Nigel Farage as part of the panel. It's a leadership question time. He will be included in that now after a barrage of complaints from people, including Farage himself, but he won't be invited to a special leadership debate special, only the question time panel. The leadership debate will be the four biggest parties, Labour, Conservatives, SNP and the Lib Dems. No Reform representation on that special programme. Maybe they'll change their minds.
Well, the problem with that is ignoring him only makes him stronger. Because it just proves, it's a bit like the Trump situation. He begins to look like the underdog. And the 5 or 7 million people, I reckon, will vote for the Reform UK party will just go, well, screw all of you then. We're just going to vote Reform. The other problem, of course, they've got is Farage is so much better an orator than any of the other leaders. He just wipes the floor with the others, doesn't he? They'll all be talking about him, even if he's not there, though, won't they, Gemma?
Yeah, they will. And I don't want to come across as a Farage supporter necessarily. I'm not actually, but he's got the confidence and the chutzpah which people want in their politicians. He does show up the roboticness of the others who are terrified of doing anything wrong, but by definition, by being terrified and not wanting to upset anybody, they offend everybody because they don't really stand for anything except for globalist policies, which is very clear. So he does, he's of course he is the leader. He's setting the tone. He can say what he likes, whereas the others are so beholden to the party members, the donors. Farage is wealthy enough and confident enough to just swagger in because of the way Reform is structured. It's a completely different way of doing politics, and it seems to be working so far. But of course, it's all speculation ahead of July the 4th. We don't really know if strategy is going to work. It's all speculation. But July the 4th is edging ever nearer. So let's see.
One thing is for sure, though, when you hear Rishi Sunak saying, "I'm focused on winning the election," it just sounds ridiculous. It'd be like being on the deck of the Titanic. "I'm focused on hitting the iceberg." I mean, it's ridiculous. I wonder if he actually regrets calling it for the 4th of July, because he's bound to lose. He could have been the Prime Minister for another 5 months if he hadn't been so impatient. But we shall see. Double figures. I predicted 99 seats a couple of months ago. I've got no reason to change that, really. I think if Ed Davey hadn't been playing the clown, he might have actually been able to get to the official opposition position, but we'll see. But just a word, what do you think about Ed Davies' antics? Wheelbarrow races, paddle boards, Thorpe Park?
I mean, there are no words, are there? Maybe he just thinks, oh, well, I'll just try and take a different approach and try and look like I'm having fun and failing miserably at all of those things. And he's not, he didn't do too well out of the post office scandal, did he? He didn't come off too well with that, the IT scandal. So I think a lot of people, I know you're a former Liberal Democrat yourself, but I think a lot of people have lost interest in the Lib Dems personally. That's my take. They're kind of always regarded as the also-rans and a token now in UK politics. That's my take on the Lib Dems. Ed Davey. I struggle sometimes to remember who he is when he pops up. That's how little I engage with the Lib Dems.
I used to share an office suite with him. Nice bloke, really nice bloke. Have troubles with his children, a child, but I just don't think he's showing the leadership. And he could look so much better. Wide-eyed, sincere, better kind of politics line. That's what I'd have done if I'd been him. But no, who listens to me? When I told them that Nick Clegg would ruin the party, I was ostracised. And Nick Clegg ruined the party. I told you so. At least he's outlasted the former UKIP leader, 34 days. Anyway, right, thanks very much indeed. That is Gemma Cooper. Have your say as well. Go to tntradio.live. Next, we're going to talk about why so little investment is happening in the UK with our very own Roger Gilwell. He'll be joining me in just a moment right here on TNT.
TNT's Jason Olbourne.
Meanwhile, in the mainstream, this is a headline from today, an exclusive, would you believe it, from the Daily Mail. Ready for this? Lip reader reveals adorable remark George made to Princess Kate during the state carriage procession. A lip reader is what the mainstream news is relying upon to create exclusive headlines. Meanwhile, they're rejecting absolute science and data proving and debunking that COVID jabs were safe and effective. That's where we're at now with the mainstream news. So are we the new news? Have to be. What are they? Old news. They're finished. It's an incredible story. So take much confidence in what we're talking about here at TNT. We're not going to stop. We're just getting bigger, stronger and better, as are the people, the many beautiful, wonderful guests that we're able to get on the show.
Weekends with Jason Olbourne on today's News Talk, TNT.
The Light is Britain's far-right conspiracy theory paper spreading hate and vicious lies. No, that's what the BBC say. The Light is the only national newspaper bringing you the real news and informed opinion on what's really going on today. You can subscribe, order copies, submit articles and read back issues on our website, thelightpaper.co.uk, and see for yourself why the establishment are so worried about the uncensored truth getting out to people every month. The Light Paper. Not for right, just right so far. thelightpaper.co.uk.
The human mind is like a computer, no matter how efficient it may be. Its reliability is only as great as the information fed into it.
That's a campaign promise.
Tell us the truth. Tell us the truth.
We mandate that the truth be told.
You're hearing it.
TNT.
On that point, truth will out, says in the chat. If Harmer, World Economic Forum appointee, gets in and gets as far as he wants, the country will be shut down under a climate crisis emergency or N1H1 rubbish. The farms will be taken down over the system. Will take us into their camps. A pretty sceptical view by Truth Will Out. I'm sympathetic to what you say actually there. Lembit's all in the report from the Iron Mountain nuclear safe bunker, NY State. And bad news, what do you think, says Lisa, in response to what's happening? As Mark says, it's not all bad news. There's quite a lot of it, but it's not all bad news. Kennedy Williams says, when have politicians ever answered honestly when posed an awkward question? And T says, who asks, it feels scripted every time they are on. There's no script here. You'll be glad to know, as you can see. Live and unlocked, as it were, and be locked and loaded, by the way, after 10 with Rick Munn. But coming up now, let's talk about this curious case of underinvestment in the United Kingdom. The UK had the lowest rate of business investment out of all G7 nations, a third year in a row, apparently, according to the new report. The economies of the US, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan are all said to have attracted higher investment than in the private sector as a percentage of gross domestic product in 2022. Here to tell us more about what's going on is our very own finance expert, Dr. Roger Gewolb. Roger, how have you been?
Very well. Thank you, Lembit.
Good to see you again.
You too.
Why are we doing so badly with investment, Roger?
There's nothing curious about it, but I mean, it's just a joke. And now, of course, we are facing an election in 15 days where we have a choice between continued incompetence and a serious irresponsibility. You've got the Tories who have been doing actively everything they can to discourage investment in British business for years. I mean, look, I used to get 2-3 times a month a conspiracy message. I get them now every day, and they say, Dr. Roger, wake up and smell the coffee. What is wrong with you? Nobody can be this stupid. This is a plot. This is the World Economic Forum. This is the Illuminati. This is the Martians. This is the Jews. This is the Muslims. This is the Islam. This is I mean, they're all different where they're coming from, but you know, it's insane. My mailbox is flooded with this stuff because it's true. The Tories make one, and especially Fishy Rishi Sunak, and Bates Motel Hunt make one stupid move after another. They're absolutely unbelievable. It's got to be on purpose, these people are saying to me. So it's not curious at all because nobody is going to invest in Britain, and it's been this way for years. It's a joke. On the other side, you've got a bunch of rabid, crazy socialists with Jeremy Corbyn inside them, pulling all the levers, talking nonsense. The Tories are going to stimulate investment by tax cuts. Well, they wouldn't know what a tax cut is if it came up and bit them. The tax cuts they have all adopted so far, reductions in national insurance, every think tank in the land has said, if you work the numbers out on these, they're actually tax increases because they haven't moved the income tax thresholds. Labor is going to stimulate investment by nothing more solid than partnerships with business. We're going to be, and now, you know something? I believe that. When I first moved to this wonderful country I came here from Paris some decades ago. I interviewed tycoons and captains of industry who were basically, you know, running things, as they still do today. And they said to me, you know, lad, you'll always make money under labor and you'll always lose it with the idiot Tories. And I said, you know, I just got here. I just got off the coach yesterday. I don't know. How could that possibly? I don't understand. How could that be? And they said, because labor is 10 times more bent and crazy than the Tories. So you could do anything you want in their partnerships with business.
It's got you don't sound French to me, Roger, but maybe I just haven't been there for a long time. But the fact is, there's a hint that you might know something about the land of the free. And I was once told the difference between Britain and America is, in Britain, people say, my neighbor's a millionaire, I hate him. In America, you say, my neighbor's a millionaire, I want to be like him. And it does feel to me that in this country, there's a bitterness that's come into the Labour Party talk. We're going to tax the rich. If you're rich, we're going to make you pay for everything else. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, Roger, but I think when Labour win, is going to get even worse, even to the point that they're now going to increase tax on private schooling. So people who take their children out of the system they're paying for are going to have to pay even more for the privilege.
Yeah, I mean, it's all true. It's been there a long time. You remind me of something. I used to be in the film business, and I can remember a book I read. I think it was John Boorman, the Irish director's book, something Money into Gold or something like that. It was about the making of the film that he made that I think won Oscars, called Emerald Forest, a long time ago, a wonderful film. And he tells the story, and I probably am going to get the names wrong, but he is sitting at the table in Hollywood at the Oscars, and next to him is another very well-known English director, whose name I won't mention. And it's announced, and the Oscar goes to John Boorman. And this English director next to me, he wrote, looked at me and said, well, you know, John, if you like these sort of things. I mean, the jealousy was just terrible. Yes, I mean, we still envy success here. I don't know why. And in America, you know, they watch movies like The Founder about Ray Kroc starting McDonald's. They love success and they want to emulate it. It's changed a little bit over the years since the Big Bang in 1986, when the city was deregulated and American investment banks and all sorts of, swashbuckling, swinging big you-know-whats came over here. And the culture of the city certainly changed. It's changed a bit, but it's still there. Yeah, you're right. And it's a shame. And I don't think that's what holds us back per se, though. I think it's just the British disease, which I first heard of when I came here from France. I am American, and I did live in France, and I'm bilingual, and when I'm there, I feel French and all that, blah, blah. But when I came here, you know, I did feel that sort of British disease. In those days, you had to buy the BT engineer a drink to get your phone installed, or they wouldn't come around. And people just didn't want to do their jobs. And there's still a lot of that around today, even with young people. It's part of the culture.
Now, this poor investment, I guess, is bad for the British public because there's less money going around. Is there something that a government could do to fix this? We haven't had average levels of investment since 1990, I understand.
And do you know what, Lembit? They say this Institute for whatever it is. I'm sorry,
Fiscal Studies.
No, I think it's Institute for Financial Responsibility. They all, right. You know, they all have acronyms and very boring names. But this particular, hold on, I can tell you what it is. I should give them credit. The Institute for Public Policy Research, the IPPR.
IPPR, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so the IPPR pointed out, I believe it's they, that if we hadn't had this disinvestment, low rate of investment since 1990, we would have just under $2 trillion extra in the coffers today.
Oh,
can you
that's
imagine?
Great to know. It's great to know that we've
and Bates Motel wouldn't be telling us we can't afford tax cuts. But you know, we can afford tax cuts because the story he's telling us is rubbish. I mean, I've been on about this for a long time, and Richard Tice of the Reform Party has been saying this for ages, and this is one of their platforms. They're the only party saying it, which is that if the Bank of England stopped paying almost $40 billion a year in interest to the ruddy banks on the quantitative easing, phony printed money that the insane Andrew Bailey, the totally incompetent Bailey-osaurus at the Bank of England has printed, we'd have $40 billion a year. Let me ask you a question. How much do you think it will cost per year to raise the tax threshold on income tax for the lowest earners and pensioners from 12,570 quid to 20,000? About 40 billion. So of course they could do that tax cut, but he's gaslighting us along with Sunak as usual and all the rest of these nincompoops that we don't have the money, and that's why they haven't moved the threshold. And even Labor has never said they're going to move the threshold. Now, what can a government do? I have made a wild prediction in the last 24 hours that the Tories have destroyed themselves to such an extent that they are not going to recover for decades, if generations. They have utterly destroyed the party. Labor, Hear the Fear, is the scariest thing imaginable, with Angela Rayner and Jeremy Corbyn and anti-Semitism, anti-capitalism, all the rest of it. People are just too frightened. Many people probably just won't go vote. I have made the prediction that the Tories are going to have to let Nigel Farage in. And if you work with Nigel, he doesn't run alongside you, you run alongside him. I've made the prediction that Nigel Farage has a 60 to 70% chance of controlling the Tory party within 15 days. Okay, wow. If I get that wrong, call me Pish or whatever you want. But I mean, if they have any sense, they will do that. Otherwise, they're going into oblivion. What can the government do? Read their manifesto. The points that are in there, I have tweeted over and over again. Nobody else has said, and they're common sense points for Brits. I don't know if they'll be any better than, I'll be done in just a sec. I have to qualify this. I don't know if they'll be better than any other politicians. I don't know whether they'll carry them out or we'll just end up saying it was just a bunch of waffle. I don't know, but at least they're saying the right things that no one else is.
Roger, thanks so much. You make me feel better about poking my nose into American business and maybe French business too. That is Roger Gould, a doctor no less. You heard it first here. Let's see if his prediction is true. All of that with Roger. We'll have him back as well. Coming up next, we've got Hardy Perennial. By popular demand, we've got Christopher Monckton coming up in just a moment. Right here with me, Lembit Opik, on TNT. See you in a moment.
What brings you here?
News Talk Radio.
TNT Radio News.
Matt Boyland here with a look at your TNT headlines. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has lashed out at his country's staunchest ally, firing a shot at Washington for withholding weapons shipments. Israel's once again been accused of using starvation as a weapon of war, as Palestinians are plagued with famine and disease. And Beijing's clapped back at NATO after the alliance's chief sensationally claimed it was China that's fueling the war in Ukraine.
The common housefly, caught in the clutches of the spider's web. Every move it makes just makes matters worse. Then, dinner time.
Feast on the captivating stories, videos, and helpful information on our website.
Whoa.
Dinner's ready.
Oh, man.
Escape is futile.
Just one more video.
Get stuck in our web.
TNT Radio.live.
Welcome back. Lots of comments, but I don't want to waste a moment longer because backed by popular demand, the clamour from you, the viewers, is deafening. We have one of your favourite guests. It's Christopher Monckton, who is a former advisor to Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, and I was a political advisor to the Conservatives and a UKIP candidate as well. Christopher, I don't know what you're doing, but our viewers love you. How are you?
Well, how very flattering they are. But I think your viewers are an unusual lot because the far left doesn't like what I have to say. But everybody else is willing to hear it.
Well, why do you think the far left doesn't like you?
I think probably because I don't like any form of totalitarianism. And so whenever you get attempts to shut down debate, which is a very big thing in Britain in particular now, I fight against that. So on all manner of questions, from whether we should be told what personal pronouns we should use, to whether we should be silenced if we question whether it's a good idea to kill babies without even giving them an anesthetic, or if we say, for instance, that the global warming nonsense was based on a very straightforward, very elementary but subtle error of physics. which led them to over-predict the amount of warming we'd get. And we're not getting the warming they predicted. It's far slower and more harmless than that. But if you say any of these things or anything like these things in Britain now, however politely, however kindly you say them, however well-informed you are, they will try to cancel you. For instance, on several TV shows like this, when they've had me on, the next thing that happens is that viewers who are on the far left will complain to the Office for Communism, which regulates what news broadcasters can say. And for instance, on climate change, the Office for Communism has said in its guidance on how it will interpret the Communications Act 2003, which governs the impartiality of news broadcasters, they say, well, the question of climate change is settled science. Well, there are only two categories of people who say that there is such a thing as settled science. Either people who are unbelievably crassly ignorant or hardline communists. Nobody else would say that. And the fact is, it turns out that the so-called settled science on climate change is indeed settled, but in the other direction. It is now known that global warming is not, after all, going to be a problem. Better than that, it's actually going to be net beneficial and is already proving to be so. We've now had about a century of global warming. In that century, global population has quadrupled, so it's certainly done no harm to population, but also the number of people dying from any form of adverse weather has fallen by 99% in the last 100 years. Now, that to me doesn't look like the existential threat which your former party, the Liberal Democrats, are pleased to call it in their manifesto.
It's extraordinary. I'm embarrassed by the fact that the Liberal Democrats, which used to be fairly highbrow, fairly intelligent bunch of people, have just swallowed it.
Well, there were folks like you, but they're not anymore. They're thickos.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're right. Just on this point, I'll indulge us for a little longer. It's quite obvious that this entire carbon dioxide demonization started with a very clever man called Svante Arrhenius in the late 1890s, who for his time was doing some quite interesting work. But even by the early 1900s, Knut Armstrong completely dismembered his claim that CO2 was driving climate. It was out the window by about 1905. But it doesn't seem to have...
That's why it's such a joy to talk to you. You're one of the very few people who ever went anywhere near Parliament who actually understands any of this. Of course, you're quite right. Svante Arrhenius, in his paper of 1896, got it wrong because he was using incorrect lunar spectral data as part of his calculations. So it led him to overstate the amount of global warming a doubling of CO2 would cause. And by 1906, he published another paper in which he substantially corrected the earlier paper. And somehow the communists who are pushing this climate nonsense as a way of taking away Western hegemony by getting us to shut our own economies down, as Britain very substantially and very foolishly has done, they don't somehow mention the 1906 paper. They only mention the 1896 paper by Arrhenius. And of course, they don't mention any subsequent paper, of which there are many, that shows that the warming effect that's predicted at 2 to 5 Celsius degrees per doubling of CO2, which is broadly speaking the amount of warming they say we should expect from all the activities of man over the whole of the 21st century. It's not going to be that. It's now known that it's going to be somewhere between 0.9 and 1.3 Celsius. Maybe absolute tops, you could push it to 2, but that's all, and that's going to be beneficial. So the whole thing scientifically has long since collapsed, but politically, all the major parties, with the honourable exception of Reform, are still wittering on about climate change as though it was some sort of threat, and using that as the excuse not only to continue destroying our manufacturing base, which has collapsed as a direct result of the excessive electricity prices that means manufacturers can't afford to turn the machines on, And our last steelworks has just closed down because it couldn't afford to turn the furnaces on because the cost of electricity is now just too great. Why is it too great? It's not because the raw materials have gone up in price. It's because it's very, very expensive to try to generate electricity with windmills, for heaven's sake, 14th century technology to address a 21st century non-problem.
It's always a pleasure to speak with. It's like a mental tonic. Just in order to edify our viewers a bit more, one of the reasons I perhaps take an even stronger line on this than you do is because Knut Armstrong, who was the guy who undermined the original work, he was the guy who did the first proper spectral analysis of CO2, the absorption spectral analysis. So he was in the best position to say this thing was rubbish. And yet here we are 120 years later, when the swivel-eyed climate cultists just ignore the science. It is settled, like you said before. And it's impossible, actually impossible, for carbon dioxide to do anything like the same as the main greenhouse gas, which is water vapor. But you don't hear anyone demonizing water, do you?
Well, of course, what they do to deal with the water vapor, they say, but we do allow for water vapor because the water vapor feedback is where they think between 50 and 80% of the warming caused by CO2, for instance, would come from. They say that the CO2 directly warms the atmosphere, then you get a knock-on additional warming called water vapor feedback, because water vapor is a greenhouse gas, and if you warm the atmosphere directly with a gas like CO2 or methane or O2 or N2O, all these different greenhouse gases, then the air that you warm, the space occupied by the atmosphere, putting it really exactly, is capable of carrying more water vapor. And it does so, and we can measure this, but it doesn't do so to anything like the effect they think. And they got it wrong, particularly in the upper atmosphere, in what's called the mid to upper troposphere, which is where they said most of the warming should be happening over the tropics. Only it isn't. Virtually every data sheet doesn't show warming up there because the water vapor isn't accumulating up there in the way that they thought it would. But they made an even bigger mistake than that. And this is one that they are really embarrassed about. All of them now know about it, the people who are peddling this climate nonsense in the scientific community, but none of them dares admit it because it makes them look like the idiots they are. What they did at a vital point in their calculations of how much global warming we might cause, they forgot the sun was shining. They left it out of account in the input signal to the feedback loop. And 97% of the input signal to the feedback loop is the sunshine temperature, which is 260 Kelvin. So the 1 Kelvin or Celsius of us adding a doubling of CO2 is not going to make much difference compared with the sunshine. That's what they got wrong. That's why it isn't warming up at anything like the rate they originally predicted and still predict. Because, of course, once you've made one of these official predictions and you're proven wrong, you can't go back on it. I mean, to take another subject, which I know you're interested in, which is diabetes. The government's advice on what to eat in this country recommends a high carbohydrate, low fat diet. Now, that advice was based on somebody who wasn't even a doctor, called Ansel Keys, back in the 1950s. And he did bogus research all the way from the 1950s to the 1970s. He bent the numbers, fiddled the data. All of this is published, it's known. And he said that because people who were cut open once they'd had heart attacks were found to have fat in their aortic artery, therefore it was eating fat that had caused them to have the heart attacks. It wasn't. It was actually the high carbohydrate diet, which the West has now favored for many decades since his time, that causes lesions or wounds in the arterial walls. And those lesions, which are caused by the inflammation caused by excess of carbohydrate in a diet, you realize the amount of carbohydrate that is actually needed in the body, in our diet, is zero. You don't need any. What you do need is saturated fat. which you get from meat, which the government says you shouldn't be eating. And the climate change nutters then come along and start pestering the farmers, and they're now trying to close down the agricultural industry in this country. The roast beef of old England itself is now under attack from these climate ninnies. And why? Because of cow farts. And so they want to start imposing cow fart taxes. And look what's happening in Europe, where at last the farmers, who are much less docile than they are here, have been campaigning on the streets in France, in Belgium, in Holland. I met the stunningly beautiful lass who coordinates the farmers in Holland, and they are having a lovely time forcing their government to start facing some of these scientific realities, which are quite elementary. But how has it come to this? Well, that's because of the enormous degree of censorship that is now exercised in every degree. For instance, if I were to post a video like this on YouTube, it would be blocked, or my channel would be shadow banned. They've learnt not to ban outright now, because that causes immediate outcry. What they now do is they shadow ban you. So if you try to find the Moncton YouTube channel by searching on the YouTube search engine, you won't find it. It's there. I've left it there with a stub of a few videos on it, but their own thing will never connect to it. So if I want to get a video up, I go to Oxford, as I did a couple of years ago. I gave a lecture on this era where they forgot the sun was shining. And that lecture has now had just coming up on 200,000 hits, because it's got underneath their censorship radar. I told them not to use the word climate change in the tagline, and so their censorship robot didn't pick it up. Sorry, you go.
No. I've got to move on. I could listen to you all day. Maybe we can have a longer chat on a Saturday on my show, if that would be acceptable. I love listening.
I'm very happy to do that.
Just one piece of breaking news you may have missed yesterday. The BBC covered it. Apparently, it's very hot in Greece at the moment. Who knew? Thanks.
Oh, yeah. I used to live in Cyprus and spent 8 years there. Because they had a very favourable tax regime, and they don't anymore, because they made the mistake of joining the European tyranny by Clark, and therefore the taxes went up, so I got out. But it was lovely for 8 years there, and one would often have in Lefkosia, which is the main city there, dates back to the Venetians, the temperatures would be 45 degrees Celsius. And I would travel around in Nicosia on my motorbike in full motorcycle leathers in 45 degrees Celsius temperature. And one thought nothing of it. I mean, what is all this bedwetting on about warmer weather? There's nothing surprising about it. If you live in a Mediterranean country, you're going to have warmer weather. Sit back and enjoy the sunshine that climate scientists forgot.
Thank you for shining a light on the facts. We'll get you back very soon. I could listen to you all day, but we must move on. That's Christopher Monkton, back by popular demand. Hope you liked what he said. Coming up next, we got Kate Shemirani, who's going to be talking about cancer. All of that with me, Lembit, Opik, right here on TNT.
Hi. I'm your retirement fear. But don't be scared. You're still in pre-retirement.
Pre-retirement? Does that mean I have more time to plan?
Precisely. Here, this is pretirement.org.
Retirement savings options? Potential tax breaks?
Yep. Moo.
Oh, I could build up savings for my side hustle. This isn't scary. I'm doing it.
You got this.
Visit thisispretirement.org for free resources to help you customize your action plan.
When a crisis hits, close to home and across the globe, nonprofits are on the front lines, ready to serve. Healing, nurturing, rescuing, protecting, inspiring. The work of philanthropic organizations has never been more important, and it's donors and volunteers like you who make all this possible. Thank you. The Nonprofit Alliance.
Lembit Opik on today's News Talk, TNT Radio.
Welcome back, bringing us up to the top of the hour. And after that, remember, we've got Rick Munn locked and loaded here on today's News Talk. We've got one of the best of the bunch. It's Kate Shemirani, TNT host and nurse. Kate, how have you been?
I'm always good. What do I have to complain about? I have running water, I have a roof over my head, I have food. I just don't watch the telly, so I'm sane.
Yes, but you live in a country where apparently we're falling way behind on cancer care. This is meant to be a first world country. So much is not working here. What is the situation? You're usually a beacon of hope. What's the problem? What's the solution, Kate?
Well, let's split that. We'll talk about the problem first. First of all, you're talking about a political thing. You're talking about the NHS that is a cult. It ranks in the lowest third in the world for treatments available, waiting times and treatment outcomes. And yet we are all forced to pay into it when we should be adopting a system like Switzerland or Belgium. So that's the first thing. So then what we're bombarded with this all the time. We know there's an election coming up. So if you look at the I think it was the 22 or 2021 manifesto signed by Matt Hancock, the NHS mandate signed by Matt Hancock. He said that there would be 50,000 new nurses and 40 new hospitals. Well, where's Wally? He was almost as, the new hospitals are harder to find than Kate Middleton was. There are no new hospitals. They're just building wings onto hospitals that look like they're just death rooms because they're not increasing the kitchen size. So they clearly don't have any intentions of feeding anybody. They're end of life care. And also the 50,000 nurses, where are they coming from? An overseas agency where they're paid over £1 million per year and given great incentives. So they keep their mouths shut and they do as told. So the political, if you look at who invests in pharmaceutical companies, all of the politicians, who drives these elections, the pharmaceutical companies, who gets to choose treatments, who gets to choose who goes at the very top and who gets the top jobs, who gets to choose what gets printed in the magazines, the so-called, their rags that they put out where they all pat themselves on the back, peer-reviewed nonsense. Who gets to decide all of that? Pharmaceutical companies. And even if you can refute what they're saying with evidence, you'll have your funding removed, you'll have your career destroyed, you could lose your life. So that's the political side of it. The history side of it, what is the NHS? Well, it's supposed to be free healthcare for all at the point of source. We know that's not true. And we know we're moving into algorithmic medicine. So if you go on to why are cancer rates increasing? It's no good talking about, we have to look at why are they increasing? If you look at the turn of the century, it was less than 1 in 50. Now it's 1 in 2. It's soon to be 100%. Why is that? What's happened in the last 100 years? Well, you have toxins in the environment, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides. You have vaccines with immortalized cell lines in them, WI38, MRC5 from a male aborted fetus, WI38 from a female. As your immunity drops because you become more toxic, then these immortalized cells are what? They're tumorigenic. SB40 that was in the polio vaccine that's now in the COVID shots. You have that. You have EMFs in the atmosphere, which changes the electrical field around the body. That's going to change how you convert your fourth state of water, your crystalline gel, H3O2. That's your potential energy. So what is cancer? It's toxicity of the entire system, where the whole body is toxic. And it's you cannot generate an immune response. So sugar in the presence of oxygen generates energy, ATP. Well, if you've got a cell that's now got damaged DNA because of the toxins, because of everything that's got toxins in the water, fluoride, all of these things, and you can't repair that cell because you don't have enough energy, repair that DNA or kill it, and it divides, you now have a palpable, detectable mutation starting to grow. If we look at fluoride, fluoride displaces iodine from your thyroid gland. It's one of the heavy halogens, fluoride, chlorine, bromine. Bromine's in all your fire retardants. That's new car smell. When you don't have enough iodine, and Dr. Max Gerson, I'll go on to, showed that all his cancer patients that died at autopsy were deficient in iodine. 40% of women in the UK underactive thyroid. Why have you got an underactive thyroid? Because it's not got enough iodine in it. So if you've got lack of iodine in the breast need iodine, then you're going to start to have inflammation, which is a precursor to cancer, cyst, nodules cancer. So if you go through all of this, you've got the 1939 Cancer Act taking it back to political. If anybody says, well, I've got a treatment that will cure, you go to jail without passing go and collecting $200. So you have this whole system where they keep you quiet. Now, you and I, we're all old farts, including the producer. We're all going to break.
Finish your point, because we're going to have to wrap up. But last sentence to you. Go ahead.
So if you look at, no one's questioning why is it increasing anymore. They're being brainwashed into just accepting that you need to have cytotoxic drugs.
Yeah. We're going to have to. We'll have to get you back for the solutions there. That's the problem.
Is that it?
We're out of time, Kate. I'm sorry. I could listen to you all day. We just had such great guests today. Promise we'll get you back. I'll give you more time next time. Yes, but no, but we'll get you back because you are fantastic. But with that, we're out of time. Rick Mann is next. Big thank you to the team. Big thank you to Kate. I'll be back tomorrow morning at 0800 right back here. The Lembit Opik Show on TNT. Have a great day.